Many blessings. This is VerDarLuz from Divine Timing Coaching, and I want to share this video today with you about relocation astrology and specifically the Saturn line. So I'm going to share a few quick stories about some of my experience. I lived on Saturn line for over 10 years in Colorado, New Mexico. I've also traveled to a Saturn line, and I thought this would be really helpful for you to understand if you might be interested in moving to a Saturn line, or it might be a line that you live on, how you might navigate it. So I'm going to share the maps with you, and you can follow along with where I've lived with Saturn. And to understand first that we always take our charts with us wherever we go. So we take the condition or the dignity of the planet, in this case Saturn, we take it with us wherever we go. And so what I want to do in this video is show you my chart a bit and show you some of the angles to Saturn and then how that might be impacting some of the experience. That's really important to understand how we live in a location. It's not just a line or a planetary influence and the archetype of that. It's actually about how that planet is configured in our chart. So let me show you how this is working in my life. Here, I'm going to share with you, you'll see a map here, and I use a number of mapping softwares. This is solar maps, but this is just kind of easy to see on this software. And I want you to notice this, excuse me, dotted line here. This is Saturn on the IC, the angle of the home. And, you know, this is, here's Denver, here's Boulder would be right around here, Evergreen would be here. Now, I've lived in all these places. And it was about a 10-year journey that I was here. I still traveled and moved around a bit. Then I also lived in Taos a few years ago for 3 or 4 months. I, you know, of course, did things in Santa Fe and, you know, in Durango area and in Colorado Springs. Those are different stories, but still was on the Saturn line here. Now, one of the things is that generally, of course, Saturn can bring pressures or responsibilities into our life. Saturn is a work-focused planet, but we're putting the energy of commitment, discipline, dedication, hard work, concentrated energy, accountability, all of these Saturn words, structure, system, all in the area of the home here. And what's interesting, of course, this is the longest place I lived anywhere outside of where I was born, which was in California. And it did kind of force me, to establish some roots there. Now, there's something interesting to notice. This is important when we're studying astrolocality, is that the planets are, sometimes we would say, am I living on the third house sign or the fourth house sign? And this side and this side are different experiences of this line. And so I'll show you in the chart here, so you could just kind of see that in Denver, Saturn is about 3 degrees away from the angle of the home, but in the third house. And this is using whole sign houses. So there's a third house energy to the fourth house, meaning, okay, I'm grounded there. It's on the angle of the home, but it's not in the fourth house. It's leaning into the third house. So there's a flavor of ideas of the third house impacting sort of the reason why I'm there, how I use that Saturn energy, what some of the focus is. And this was really true. So let me explain that. So first of all, my Saturn is in Leo, and my Saturn is squaring my sun, and the sun rules Leo. Okay. So we could think that, this could be a place where I could be more creative and put a lot of work into that. Now, within the first year I was there, I did start to, I was working on some books, and by having lived there for 2 years, I completed my first training workshop, like launching an online training. I wrote an album within about 3 or 4 months, and I wrote my first book together at the same time, and then I performed them within about a 6-month period. So writing the book, writing and composing the album, performing the album, it was about 7 to 8 months, I think, total. And that was within the first 2 years I lived in the Denver area. So that really emphasizes the Leo theme of Saturn and Leo. Saturn squaring the Sun, this planet of creativity and performance and music. Excuse me. And then we also have the third house theme. So, third house would be an area of ideas and information and communication and messaging and short trips and yes, I mean I've traveled all over the state. That's one thing, but I really kind of started like 3 or 4 books when I was working on my first book. And so what happened was I was taking all these different ideas and synthesizing them, and I turned it into a course. And then I fairly quickly worked on my second book, Aquarius Dawns. And so having lived in the area for about 3 years, 2 books were completed, a number of trainings, and then I started recording online classes, which is a very third house type of thing. So I started to create trainings for Udemy and different online teachings around astrology, and then I also started to launch more online virtual courses, ongoing courses with clients, and so that's very third house, taking ideas, synthesizing them, and it was a way of creative expression for me. Also, over this time, I started writing music that was electronic in nature. I've been a guitarist a lot of my life, and this was new for me. So I learned how to do that. And then I created an electronic album, and I was DJing. And this is where I started to DJ and really played the largest gigs of my life as a performer, both as a DJ and a guitarist. And so that's, again, very Leo, sort of third house too, a lot of creative energies. This also has to do with Venus being on my ascendant in that region, but we could also see some of that Saturn there. Now, there was also hardships, and it was not easy to find the places that I lived. I worked really hard at it, and a number of times came up against many walls in finding locations, and yet kept getting anchored back to this region of the planet. And Saturn can be quite a big weight in a location. It could be a place where you want to work on a home, right? You want to put a lot of energy into a home. It's not necessarily the best type of energy if you want like a really sort of peaceful home environment that doesn't require work. Now, I work from home, so that's one great expression of that. But you know, it wasn't easy a lot of the time. Um, and making Saturn stronger in a location can often just bring hardship into our life, or bring kind of that myth of Sisyphus, like climbing the mountain and he never quite gets to the top with the boulder. So we have to be willing to work hard, and we can be rewarded for that hard work. And I did work really hard there. But some of the challenges I had, for instance, New Mexico, trying to live in that location, um, I found a place initially, but it was an Airbnb, so that's kind of easier to find. And then once I moved into a location in Taos, there was issues I had with my neighbor, and when I kept trying to find new places in Taos or in Santa Fe, just could not find them, and eventually got the message that I needed to leave. And a number of times it was really difficult to find the right places to call home, or there was some kind of issue with the home space. But at the same time, the longest place that I did live somewhere was in Colorado in Evergreen for 4 years. So that Saturn endurance was there. Um, you know, Landlord issues were always up for me. Saturn figures in the home, right? So I hope that's helpful. And I would say that most people might not want to live where Saturn is right on the angle of the home, because it can be quite difficult if you have challenging aspects. I think it motivated me artistically. I did live alone a lot of the time. Sometimes I was quite lonely on that line. and Saturn lines can bring solitude or loneliness. But I connected with the mountain and nature. I started to ski, and so there was a really deep sort of connection with myself and myself in the spirit of nature. But it can be sometimes isolating on a Saturn line, or you put more effort into your work. And so, of all the angles, Saturn on the angle of the home could be one of the more challenging angles because he's more of a career planet. You don't really want this like comfy area of the home often to have Saturn in it. But I think I did okay. um, and I want to show you just one other thing here with Saturn. I spent some time where Saturn was on my angle of career over here. Excuse me, coming off a cold. Um, and here's Dharamsala in India. And I stayed here for about six weeks when I was around 25 years old. And I also came up to Kashmir, which would be up here area, the Tibetan Plateau and Ladakh. So we kind of traveled around this area and spent quite a significant time. But what's interesting here is, I'm picking up that same Saturn square to my sun here, but Saturn is at the upper part of the chart. Now, again, Saturn in Leo, I actually studied quite a few things here, including Reiki, and including music. And I studied the Indian Sarod. That's a very Leo things to study music. And I think it was about a month that I studied there. I did some volunteering as well, lots of writing, studying Tibetan Buddhism. Um, but it was a place that I got grounded for the sort of 9 months at that time that I was in Asia. It was a place I was in the longest. Again, Saturn being a planet of time. But what I want to stress is that Saturn can also bring health issues, and this is where my gluten intolerance started. And I have Saturn square my sun, which is, overall not a great signature for vitality and health. Also, my sun is in the 12th house, which is also not a place of great health because it's not configured to the ascendant. So, that being said, when I've thought about going back, I've been like a little bit hesitant, knowing that happened before. Um, and so we have to be a little careful. I wasn't sick all the time in Colorado or anything, fortunately, but it is something to consider. Again, this is why understanding the relationships of two planets or three planets, whatever the configuration is, when a planet is angular, when it's strong like this, what is it doing with other planets in the chart? So that's something when I'm working with clients, I'm always really, really sensitive to. And I wanted to show that to you here today in case you're thinking about moving to a Saturn line. It's really important what angle it's on. If it's on partnership, it could emphasize relationships that are more enduring, more commitment oriented. Sometimes there's difficulty, there's distance, or there's an age difference, or too much work involved. Maybe it's a professional relationship that turns into a personal one. If Saturn's rising, you have a lot of responsibility. You have to take on a burden. There's more pressures on you, and you're looked at as an authority figure, but you have a lot of weight on your shoulders, right? That can also be sometimes difficult for health. But Saturn lines can be rewarding if we put the effort in. So it's really, again, one of those planets you want to know what the configuration is, what houses it's ruling, all of those constituent parts. So again, I hope this is helpful. If I could support you with locational astrology and looking at where your power places are in the world, or if you're living on a Saturn line or curious about Saturn lines or any other planetary lines, I look forward to supporting you with that. All the best. Namaste.